everyone, I am here with one of my favorite people and one of our favorite researchers, not just because of all of her knowledge, but the joy that she just conveys in every part of teaching literacy. Like I think part of what I love working with you, Lucy, is that I can feel your passion. I feel every ounce of your desire to like just teach kids to learn to read and support teachers to be better and better. And we seek you out to come into our community and talk to our teachers and our admin and even our own staff as much as we possibly can. So everyone, we have in front of us Lucy Hart Paulson, the leading expert in early childhood language and literacy development. That's right. I have to like hit that one. She specializes in phonological awareness and the science of language learning, and she is the co-author of LETRS Early Childhood. Through her work as an author, speaker, and consultant, Dr. Hart Paulson has made significant contributions to fostering strong foundational language skills in young children and brought incredible joy for all of us to become learners. So, Lucy, Dr. Hart Paulson, we are so excited for you to like just learn with us and tell us all the fabulous. Every single time I'm with you, I take away lots of learnings and nuggets and wonderfulness. So go ahead.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the vision that you had in creating materials that are going to be really valuable in helping kids move down their journey of learning to read and write. And phonological awareness is key. I thought of an analogy just last week when I think about here's written language and here's oral language. And I think phonological awareness is like the peanut butter that goes between those pieces of bread and sticks them together, because you have to have phonology in order to learn how to talk. And you have to have phonology in order to learn how to read and write, because we have an alphabet that is based in phonology. So just have a shout out and a welcome to all of you from Central Oregon. That's where I get to live. Here's a sunset that I get to share from my deck. And you can see, as Sarah has said, I've had a lot of really amazing opportunities and a journey that started decades and decades and decades and decades and decades ago, wanting to know more about what this phonology connection is in the way that we learn how to talk, and then how that helps us learn how to read and write. And that started with my very first job as a speech and language pathologist working in schools. And so across that journey, I have learned a whole lot. And I want to share some of those thoughts with you, some of the things that we can do will make a really important difference in the lives of our children as they are learning to navigate this road to reading and writing. So I have a few little queries for you first. So take out a piece of paper or sticky note or something and write down the numbers 1 to 5. Okay, let's have a little check-in to see what your own phonological awareness understanding is. Okay, you ready? All right, so number 1, true or false? Phonological awareness requires alphabet letters. Okay, number 2, which do young children learn first? When they're learning to play with the parts of a word, do they learn to play with syllables in words first, or do they learn to play with sounds in words first? Think about that from a developmental perspective. Oh, here's a pretty specific one. How many speech sounds are in the word fix? Okay, how about number 4? How many speech sounds are in the word catch? And then here's a really important one that I emphasize so much when I get to share information on early literacy and language development with my colleagues around the country as they are in preschool, pre-K, and moving into kindergarten. So what phonological awareness skill at the beginning of kindergarten or the end of pre-K is strongly predictive for how well students are going to be learning to read, that literacy learning, in 2nd grade. So let's see how you did. So how about number 1, true or false? Phonological awareness requires letters. Nope, it doesn't. It doesn't. You can close your eyes and you can do phonological awareness in the dark. However, Because we have an alphabet, it is so important to start out with some phonological awareness. Let's activate that auditory and kinesthetic sensory system. Let's hear and feel what those sounds feel like and sound like. And now let's attach letters to them. So attaching the letters to our sounds is a very important part of what our lessons need to include. Okay, from a developmental perspective, which do little kids learn to do first? Play with syllables and words or sounds? And I hope you said syllables. Those are a bigger, more natural part of language. They follow more of the rhythm of language that young children are figuring out as they're learning how to talk. It comes to a little bit more of an abstract cognitive thinking process when you want to think about a sound, and a sound that may be in a particular word, and a sound that's going to attach to a symbol to represent our written language. Okay, so how many sounds are there in the word fix? Are you ready? And I like to use my gestures when I do this. Eh, Did you get 4? Good. If you got 3, that's pretty typical because we've been told for so long that the letter X, which is a unique letter in our alphabet because it represents 2 speech sounds when it's at the end of a word or a syllable. So there are 4 sounds there. How about the word catch? How many speech sounds in the word catch? Ch. And they're 5 letters, but there are only 3 sounds. Okay, 3 sounds there. Now, what is this really important indicator of children's literacy learning later on in 2nd grade when they're leaving pre-K and going into kindergarten? And very specifically, it's related to phonological awareness. It is a child's ability to tell you what the beginning sound is in items or words or objects or things that are in their environment and things that we're talking about. So how did you do? Pretty good, I hope. Okay, so what I'd like to talk about in a few quick on our short time together today, I'm going to just share with you some of the facts. I know there is a lot of conversation going on around phonological awareness today, and I hope I can just kind of settle some of those things into a place so that it makes a really important understanding for us as we are helping our children navigate their learning to read and write. And a big, big part of it, there's that peanut butter between 2 pieces of bread, sticking it together. So some trends, some facts. What do we really know? And then I want to just share with you some fun intervention and instructional kinds of strategies. So let's look at some facts. What we really know is that phonological awareness is one of those bright stars across the decades of reading science, where it has been one of the most powerful discoveries. Way back in the 90s, the identification that understanding the sound structure system of language contributes a significant component to learning to read and write. It's pretty simple to identify children's phonemic awareness development. It's relatively easy to teach, and instructionally, it supports gains in reading. It's one of those foundation pieces that is absolutely critical in learning to read and write in an alphabetic system like what we have. So in the development of phonological awareness, it supports the understanding of that sound and symbol, the letter and letter sound correspondence. We call that the alphabetic principle as you know. It helps with children mapping those sounds onto the words that they want to read and the words that they want to spell. There's that important reading, writing connection. It facilitates reading accuracy. You read the words accurately, and then that's going to facilitate your comprehension, as you all know. And it sharpens your awareness of word pronunciation and vocabulary learning. So think about vocabulary. It's not just about spelling and reading, but phonological awareness is really valuable for vocabulary. You know what a word means, and that's important to a word, but you also want to know how you say it. And that's what the phonologic structure of words are. And we've had extensive research in phonological awareness. Students who are learning to read and write, and those who are struggling with the reading and writing process, most often have underdeveloped phonological processing. So it's a developmental process, but it also, when it doesn't go very well in the literacy learning, that can be a huge component or factor or barrier in children's learning. Research findings across the decades document that all children in kinder and first grade, and I think now with more research, we can even add pre-K, need instruction in phonemic awareness, and then connecting that to phonics. And you know what? Here's phonics. There's a little snarky thing that I can say. You know what phonics is without phonological awareness? Onyx. That pH thing is a really important connection to the sound contribution. And phonological awareness instruction, it produces positive effects on both word reading, pseudo word reading, helping to indicating that it helps children decode novel words, words that they don't know and they haven't been directly, specifically taught, as well as remembering words that are familiar, that they have seen. Such an important contribution. Here is a brand new study that I want to share with you. And across our instruction that we do, and we talk about, pre-K, K, first grade, all students need to have instruction in phonological awareness. But a really important component to that is it doesn't take a lot of time. So this new study, an optimal dosage of phonological awareness instruction, 2024 meta-analysis by Urbali and her colleagues. And here's what their findings have been. So that optimal dosage for phonological awareness instruction, the effects of that instruction, it improves with increasing dosage up to, look at that, 10.2 hours of instruction across all of those academic grade years, pre-K, K, kindergarten. It doesn't take a lot of time. And after about 10 hours, then the impact of your instruction declines. It's not nearly as powerful. So this instruction with letters, so the second bullet or the sub-bullet of that, the results of that instruction was valuable for kids who are at risk for learning difficulties with reading down the road, and basic PA skill instruction, phonological awareness skill instruction. So all kids benefit from it. And I certainly saw that when I got to work with a lot of little friends who had difficulty learning the sounds of our language, then also had difficulty learning how to read the sounds of our language. Or when I got to work with children who were having difficulty learning to read and write, their phonological awareness skills were not very well developed. And it might be phonological awareness, it might be phonological naming, phonological memory, some of those phonological processing things that all contribute to that skill of being able to identify, isolate sounds in words. Okay, so here's another point that they found in looking at what the research is identifying. Phonological awareness instruction with letters, and those effects continually to increase after 16 hours of phonological awareness instruction. And so in that earliest time period, when kids are like pre-KK, when kids are learning about the letters, learning about sounds and attaching that sound information to letters, absolutely the value of connecting the written language component to our phonological and phonemic awareness instruction is really valuable and important. And so these findings highlight that importance of planning for the optimal cumulative dosage of early phonological awareness instruction in preschool through grade 1. So that kids are able to acquire those skills, those phonologic skills, and the phonologic orthographic, the sound, letter connection. How we teach that, and then showing progress in how children are learning to read. So many important things. And so if we just have, just this revisiting the importance of phonological awareness, blending, where you put sounds together in a word, that is a synthesizing kind of experience and task. And that is absolutely required for children to decode the sounds in a word. So you look at the letter, you hear the sound, decode what those sounds are, and then you want to blend them together. And analysis, that's what segmenting is. Let's figure out what the sounds are in those words. Being able to isolate, identify, classify what those sounds are. And that is critical for orthographic learning with spelling. Let's see, how do I spell that word? What's the first sound? What's the second sound? And then also, it's critical for rapid sight word recognition. And that word sight word kind of has a misnomer to it when you have the impression that when you look at a word, you recognize it by the way that it looks, by the sight of it. But actually, what is happening is orthographically mapping that word so quickly that it is pronounced automatically inside your head. So when you look at it, it's pronounced, and then you're able to read it. So I want to just share with you a quick timeline of literacy learning. I know this is very familiar with all of you, but let's just put this into a context. The definition I like to use for early literacy is that time period between birth and about age 5 to 6, when children are building foundation skills to be able to then to learn to read and write. And then when children make that connection between here's a letter and here's the sound that that letter represents or spells, I like to call that early reading and writing. And that generally happens in preschool to late pre-K, going into kindergarten, a big focus in kindergarten. And then also through first, second grade as you are learning to read, that big time period with phonics. And then we shift to that next reading phase, and that is reading to learn. And so if we put some phases that Linnea Airy has shared with us, that pre-alphabetic phase, pre-alphabetic meaning there is no connection to what a letter, an understanding of what a letter is and what that letter does, what the function of that letter is. And in that earliest pre-alphabetic phase, children are learning about oral language and they're being able to process it. And then, but there's also a very important visual aspect. Children look at letters, they recognize letters by the way that they look, and they're able to name them. And then as children are growing and their phonological and phonemic awareness is developing, now they're learning more about the letters, and now they're going to make some connections between what those letters are and the jobs those letters do. And then children make connections to the patterns that go in our written language system. We call that phonics. And they map letters and sounds. They're reading and writing simple words, reading words in context. And then we move into that consolidated phase where children are reading. They're reading more complex texts and writing more complex compositions. Okay, so let's look at this. Same kind of sequence. And then what is happening in the progression and development of phonological awareness. So we have this preschool to kinder to grade 2, and then 3rd grade and beyond. So we have this phonological awareness skill that's developing. Children are listening to the language that they're loved in, and they're learning to say it. They're learning to say the sounds and the words that they've been bathed in. That's the beginning of becoming aware of what the sounds are and the words that we want to say. So let's say that phonological awareness in those earliest years are blue, okay? That color blue. And you see on that left side, it's kind of light colored blue, and then it's turning into darker blue as that skill develops. At the same time, children are exposed to print. They're exposed to signs in their environment. They're exposed to books, hopefully. They're exposed to what their name looks like in a written language form. So again, let's call that red. And again, on that left-hand side, there's not very much letter learning when kids are really young, but it's starting to develop. And then here's an intent. You know what happens when you mix red and you mix blue together? You get purple, right? And that is the alphabetic principle where children are recognizing here is a letter, and this letter has a job. It represents this sound. Here's the letter M, and it says, and I know what I can do, and I want to write the word mom, or I know what I can do, and I want to read a word that has that sound in it. Okay, so then alphabetic principle, when children gain an understanding of that orthographic connection, phonemic awareness continues to develop. And so it continues to be blue, but there is a red connection into that. So it's got a purple coloring to it. Because when you learn to read and you learn to write, your brain automatically accesses that information and you can't turn it off in your brain. So here's a good example. Think about, I'm going to have you do a task and think about what your brain is doing when you do this task, okay? So consciously think what's going on inside your brain as you are processing this task. Say the word pat. Switch the first sound to the last and the last sound to the first. How many of you did P-A-T, T-A-P, where you added the letters to help facilitate your this activity, help you be successful in completing that activity? Because you have access to those speech sounds, you can't turn it off. And that's what happens with good readers. Good readers access the phonology understanding and the orthographic understanding, or the letters and letter patterns, the phonics. That's why that's so important to teach. Does that make sense? Okay. So what happens when kids aren't able to read very well, when this orthographic piece doesn't happen? Oh, here's that Zoom, and that you raise your hand, and I'm left-handed, and I always get these new Zoom thumbs up things because I'm raising my hand. Okay, so that's gone. That's good. Okay, so what happens when kids struggle with the reading process? They're struggling here because this is not helping to support them. This is not contributing to this, the phonics piece, the orthographic piece, and then the orthographic piece doesn't contribute to later and more complex phonological awareness development. So in the earliest years, it's that visual symbol that's going to lead to an understanding of that sound connection to the symbol. And here's where that practice in reading words with the patterns that you've been taught is so important. And that's what decodable books do. And then what that practice in reading decodable books does is that practice then leads to that orthographic mapping, which is automatic or seemingly so instant recognition of words. And here's kind of a timeline. What goes on with phonological awareness instruction in the earliest years is exposure. And then in that early reading and writing process, that pre-K year, kinder, first grade instruction. And then when it doesn't develop, we need to move into some intervention to help children figure out how mapping sounds onto letter patterns works when you want to read words and you want to spell them. So I hope that goes a little bit deeper in just your understanding of the connection of phonological awareness, the connection to phonics, and how they are separate skill sets, but how they are so intrinsically interconnected. So just a moment on phonological or orthographic mapping. It's that permanent storage of written words that builds gradually, and it requires phonemic awareness and word level reading skills. And here are some underlying foundations that you need. You have to have oral language. You have to have the ability to segment sounds and blend sounds in words. You have to have proficient sound symbol connections, or grapheme, which is the letter pattern, and the phoneme pattern together, and proficient phonological awareness, and they map together. So all grades. Kinder grade 1 is where these segments are growing, and then beyond grade 1, grade 2, and further into the next levels of grades, proficient phonemic awareness. And we have to do this when we're reading a word and we're not quite certain how to pronounce it. And I shared this just as we were getting started. It's one that's on top of my head, but you look at the word W-I-N-D. And you have to look at the context to know how you're going to pronounce that word. Is that going to be wind, or is it going to be wind? And what did you just do to shift wind to wind? You had to do a pretty complex phoneme substitution task in order to do that. Another really important connection to how those advanced phonemic awareness skills are critical for our reading. And again, decodable books are one of those things that give you vital practice, give our students vital practice in the skills that are needed to develop that orthographic mapping, or when it looks like they are reading by sight. Okay, so what we also know is that some of the precursors to difficulty learning to read down the road are deficits in phonological awareness, deficits in being able to Look at things that you know and say them rapidly. Rapid automatized naming, which is a phonologic processing skill. It's verbal working memory, and memory is a phonological processing skill. It's children's letter knowledge. What do they know about letters? That also has a lot to do with their rapid automatic naming of what those letters are. And then there's a really important oral language vocabulary connection. And multiple research labs have identified these as elements that can predict later difficulty learning how to read and write. And so, what can we do in the earliest grades, pre K, kinder, even into grade one? We've got much more power in kinder and pre K and kinder in building those foundations before children struggle with the learning process. We can help build really important foundations in phonological and phonemic awareness. Okay, so those are some of the facts that I wanted to share with you. Syllable learning takes place really early. That's what toddlers and preschoolers are doing, young preschoolers are doing. So is syllable awareness an important aspect? Yes, when they're really little. In pre-K, kinder, the focus of phonemic awareness absolutely has to be on the phoneme. That's what's going to contribute to children's learning to read and write, the reading words and spelling words. And then as children progress into reading multisyllabic words, we have to rely back on our understanding of how syllables work in words. So we know where we read a word, sorry about that, where and what that rhythm and pattern is of reading syllables so that we can read bigger words and know how to pronounce them. The pronunciation piece, again, is connected to phonology. All right, so let's look at some fun things that we can do. When we want to do phonological awareness, and I bet these are a lot going to match up with what you already know. But when you teach phonological awareness, here are some underlying foundations that you need to have in order to participate in phonological awareness activities and be successful. Oral language development, important foundation. You need to have a one-to-one core understanding of correspondence, that understanding of here's a sound, how many sounds are there in a particular word? You have to have that one-to-one correspondence. You have to be able to follow directions, understand the directionality of how words are. What's the beginning? What's the end? That's a really important skill that's developing in young children. And you have to have an awareness of the production of speech sounds. That production of speech sounds takes place right here. It's right by the motor strip. It's really close to the temporal part of our brain. Phonology or speech sounds are not just what they sound like. There's also a very important kinesthetic connection to how you say sounds. If you're thinking about the letter M and the sound that letter M represents, your Broca's area right up here just lit up. You don't even have to say it, but when you think about saying it, the Broca's area and what's going on here lit up. Okay, so how about this? Some robust instruction for every little friend. A lot of you joining today, I noticed you're working that preschool kind of context. And here are the things we want to work on. We want children to be able to recognize and begin to produce words that rhyme. Rhyming is a really important aspect of just hearing the structure of words, figuring out how they sound the same and different, and then how we can manipulate the first parts of a word to come up with another word that sounds the same. We want young children to be able to blend and segment syllables, and we want them to begin to learn how to blend and segment beginning sounds in words. That's what's going on phonologically in preschool age children. When you connect that component to the phonics and word recognition, we're learning about letters. We're learning about letter names. And many times young children are going to start, pre-K kids are going to begin to make the connection of the name to the sound. But young children generally have much greater letter name knowledge than they do letter sound knowledge. And we want little kids to absolutely be exposed to the signs that are in their environment and figuring out what those signs mean. So those symbols have powerful meanings. And then when we move into kindergarten, we're growing. We want children to be able to recognize and produce rhyming words, string of rhyming words, blend, certainly absolutely strong skill in blending and segmenting syllables. Also, being able to blend and segment initial final sounds, and then that's going to move into the middle sound. So they can blend and segment words that have 3 sounds in them. That's what the standards the requirement is, and appropriately so. And you want kids to be able to create new words by manipulating the phonemes in single syllable words, which actually is what rhyming is, right? Tell me another word that rhymes with boat. You have to manipulate the first sound and come up with another sound, another word that has that a different beginning sound but same ending. And then from a phonics, you know this, demonstrate letter sound knowledge of the consonants and the vowels with the short vowel sound, the long vowel sound, and then begin to decode simple CVC words because you are applying that letter sound knowledge. And you want kids to read common high frequency words. Should have also added that we want them to be able to begin to spell some of those words as well. And invented spelling, it's a good thing. In first grade, phonological awareness is continuing to develop, but that syllable stuff should be completely in place. The simple segmenting, blending of sounds words that have 3 sounds should be very solid. And now moving into being able to blend and segment single syllable words, but that are a little bit more complex. They might have a consonant blend or cluster at the beginning of a word like stop, or a consonant blend that is at the end of a word like fast. And then also continuing to be able to play with word structures, manipulating what those sound elements are in words. And it's so much fun and playful. In phonological awareness is play, it's wordplay. And then what is happening in the phonics and word recognition skills is children are using their understanding of that sound and letter correspondence. They're learning more letter patterns, those digraphs, because we have an English phonology system and we have a Latin alphabet. It's not a good match. So we had to be pretty creative in coming up with other letter patterns to represent all of the speech sounds that are in our language. Children are learning to decode word patterns that have some interesting phonic patterns, like the silent E. Vowel teams, syllabification with vowels, with the vowel sounds. When you have a word that has more than 1 syllable, every syllable has to have a vowel. Moving into decoding longer words, identifying what basic root words are, what simple suffixes are, and then becoming more automatic in reading those high frequency words. And I will say, out of the first 100, that's what I've just kind of done a little analysis of, the first 100, what we would call high frequency words, almost all of them have some aspect of decodability. Look at those words, see what letter patterns the sound representation for, and you can begin to read it, and then you can flex what that pronunciation is going to be. And again, here's where that good practice in the phonics patterns that you have been taught is such an important, valuable aspect of literacy learning. And then you add the spelling component to it, and it makes it so much, such a valuable connection. And truly, the letters and letter patterns that children are learning to read when they are in pre-K, kinder, first grade, are the letters and word patterns that children should be able to learn to spell and to write. That reading and writing connection should be welded together in our instruction in those earliest grades. Not we're going to do a reading section and then later on in our day have writing. It should be reading and writing together. All right, so how about a few fun things? And then we're going to open it up, I hope, and just have some question and answer conversation. So how about some rhymes? See how familiar these are to you. How many of you in your early childhood context, when you're taking attendance, right? You take attendance every day. Who's here today? And you can add a phonological awareness connection to it. Who's here today? By rhyming children's names. Um, so rhyming their names, Sarah Barra here. Let's see, how about Joseph Noshef, looking at some names that are in our chat box. Cindy Nindy, whose name rhymes with Macy, and identifying that children have to hear, children are getting lots of exposure and experience to it. We can also move it to a beginning sound piece where we're changing the beginning sound in children's words or their names. Terry Berry, I mean, those are connecting. We're doing an advanced phonemic awareness skill actually when we're doing rhyme by manipulating the beginning sound. There's that thumbs up again. We can substitute rhyming words in the directions that we use. Like it's time to go to the bribery instead of the library. And what does that do to kids' cognitive dissonance? It's like, wait, no, it's not bribery, it's library. So we just got their attention, which is a really valuable learning pillar. We have to have kids' attention if we want them to be able to learn. And they had to think about what word we were using. And we can point out words that rhyme all of the time in the things that we're doing. If you're reading the book, Peter Rabbit, we can point out that Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail. Ooh, two of those words rhyme, but one of them doesn't. One of those siblings' names. How many of those things matched up with your understanding? And I'm saying, Nicole, you always use children's names in helping them to teach rhyme. Yeah, such a powerful connection. Okay, how does that extend into then kinder into grade 1? Because some of the research or some of the conversation is that rhyming is not important. We don't even have to focus on rhyme. True, when that statement then extends to rhyming is not important for learning to read and write. It is not as specifically important as blending and segmenting is, but what I have seen anecdotally in working and asking this question with so many teachers who work with older students who are struggling with the literacy learning process, and I ask, what about those kids who are struggling? What is their rhyming skill like? And a huge percentage of students who are struggling with learning to read and write are not very good rhymers. And so to me, what I think rhyming is and how I frame it is rhyming is like that canary in the coal mine. It is one of those indicators that those students' phonological processing system is not working for them like we would like it to. So what can we do? We can help build that underlying phonologic system. We can teach it. And we do that through phonological and phonemic awareness and wordplay. Okay, so a little bit about rhyme. So what we can continue to do is also continue so that rhyming piece, but now let's match up the letter patterns. Mris, what would your name look like? Chris, what would your name look like if you had to spell it Mris? Ooh, that's an interesting pattern in how our words might work. When you do that, though, you want to make sure you know what your child's name tunes into. When you're particularly focusing on like the letter F, and you are changing your children's name to that beginning sound, be careful. Just saying. Okay, you can use an alphabet eye chart or an alphabet chart and have kids give you a whole string of rhyming words that you can use related to a letter consonant. I'll show you what that means in just a minute. I have an idea for you. And you can create a chart using rhyming or phonic patterns that we have taught to create strings of rhyming words. So many things. Okay, so here's an ABC eye chart that I wrote about quite a long time ago. This is a modified version. And this is an ABC eye chart that we can use in our preschool. context, kindergarten context, to make sure that children are over learning the alphabet pattern. And so you can sing the alphabet song, and you can see that the way that these letters are lined up relates to the pattern of the alphabet song. So I had that easy access. So I just circled the vowels, so we can skip those. But let's take the word at, and we can say bat, cat, dat, fat, gat, hat, jat, cat, lat, mat, nat. Got the image? And then what we can also do is let's write those words down. Let's identify which words are real, which ones do you know, which ones seem to be nonsense words, or I like to call them robot words, and which ones have a meaning, which ones don't. And then we can do that very same thing with, okay, let's take the word family ob and do the same thing. Let's identify what the rhyming words are, see how this pattern works. We're helping kids identify, figure out how the code works. Okay, how about blending and segmenting in, here are some hints that I like to use with blending and segmenting. Motions or gestures are really important. When we use motions or gestures, it makes it stickier for kids. I like to call those kinnings. It's a new word that I learned. Where do you think K-I-N comes from? Kinesthetic. And when I do syllables, I like to start on my right arm with my wrist, and then I move to my elbow, and then I move to my shoulder and my head, and I can go to my other shoulder, and I can use other body parts for really long words. But that kinning piece with syllables lets kids know that, oh yeah, here's the rhythm that this word provides. It also helps facilitate one-to-one correspondence. And kids know if you get to your shoulder, 1, 2, 3, oh yeah, that word has 3 syllables in it. I want to highlight what my mouth is doing. And I think for our young children right now, that's even more critical, because many of our young children, think about where they were when they were learning to talk. And if there was a context where masks were used with the caregivers around them because we wanted kids to be safe, it was done with very good intention. But if there was a mask that children were seeing in their care provider's mouth, they were not naturally learning that you tune into your mouth and you get really good information. And so now what I recommend is that we're really focusing and helping kids tune into, watch my mouth, look what's going on here. So when you're segmenting words, you want to have about 1 second interval between those parts, whether it's a syllable or whether it's a phoneme. So syllables here, phonemes, I like to use my fingers. And again, I use my left hand. Why my left hand with phonemes? You get that left to right orientation. My right arm with syllables, that same thing, that left-right orientation, helping kids see that sequence over and over and over. Okay, if you want to make it easier, we reduce that spacing, make it more challenging for kids who are ready to move forward. You can make a longer spacing. That taxes your phonological memory. Okay, and then very carefully, I think this has been a big shift over the decade that I have seen, is that when we segment sounds and words, we use the crispest pronunciation. So we say f, I, sh, but not f, I, sh. That word would be fa-isha, right? Okay, we do know that when children are progressing in their development, young children's syllables are easier than sounds to identify. In a simple syllable or single syllable word, we have the first sound is the easiest, the last sound is the next easiest, and the middle sound is the most difficult. And when you have a word that has a consonant cluster or a blend in it, it makes that word more difficult. That's what we expect in first grade. Can we have preschoolers or young kinders who figure that out? Absolutely, when we have good instruction. And so some blending and segmenting routines that we have in preschool, we can use Hickety Pickety Bumblebee, my favorite attendance song. Segmenting syllables, we can use row, what, reporting when we're giving directions. We can set up a math center where you have a balance scale and you have counters and you have words and you figure out which word is longer based on the number of sounds or the number of syllables, and lots of ways that we can play with the sounds in words, syllables and sounds in words. And then when we move into kinder first grade, we absolutely want to focus on the phonemes, and progressively move from words that are more simple, CVC words, to more complex words. We can sort pictures based on what that initial sound is, or final sound, or middle sound is. And we absolutely want to make a connection, a phonemic connection to the letter patterns. That's what our job is. And so we can do that. Here's some Elkonin boxes. You're all familiar with what those are at a syllable level with arrow, or down here at a phoneme level with oo, and tapping out the sounds. You can have the correct number of squares in that box so that it matches up with what the accurate response should be. And then we can have add a connection with letters and with writing it. And so we can do the say it, tap it, write it, right? Say bit. Let's tap it. B-it. Let's write it. B-it. And then we can move into word chains. You're familiar with these, where you have colored squares or dots or whatever. And so we can have say tap, app. We have 3 different colors. Now, say tap, but change tap to top. What do you have to do? You have to, oh, let's see. Oh, yeah, it's the middle one. So we're going to shift that middle color to another one. And now say top, and now change top to hop. What did we change this time? Oh, it was the first sound. And now say hop, and say change hop to hot. Oh, yeah, that was the last one. Now, I had that box of the words there just to see what this was going on. We don't do that with little kids, but then we want to add first we do the phonologic piece, and then we add the letter piece. So do we do phonological awareness and letters together? Yes, but it is a sequence that we want to make sure we're addressing and attending to in our understanding and in our instruction. And so first grade and beyond, if students have not established well-developed phonemic awareness skills in first grade, then they absolutely should receive a comprehensive phonological processing assessment to determine what their needs are. And then if phonological awareness skills are underdeveloped, at first for these older students, if their phonological awareness skills are not developed, do not include letters, because the letters are going to be a crutch to get to the sound. And we want students to be able to get to the sound and then attach the letter to it. Establish phonological phonemic awareness accuracy and automaticity. And through that journey, attach the letters to them. So here is, I'm gonna put this link in the chat box. If you don't have access to this or not aware of this, this is a resource that everyone, here we go. This is a resource that Jane Ashby led in just putting together a document that describes the research, describes the recommendations, the instructional and intervention recommendations based on what the research is. The next, it's a dynamic, it's an open domain, it's a dynamic and changing document. There was a change in 2023. There's to address students who are learning English as another language and phonological awareness approaches with our multilingual students. And then there's a newer and updated version that's being worked on right now that is addressing the need for, and we're working on those higher level manipulation tasks where that needs to fit into our intervention kind of opportunities. So that's what I wanted to say. We talked about some facts. I hope that added to what you already understand and go a little bit deeper. We talked about some developmental trends and had a little bit of fun talking about some instruction and some intervention strategies. So what kind of comments, what kind of questions? I see there's a whole lot of comments in the chat box, and I wasn't able to attend to all of those, but let's have a conversation about them.
So Dr. Hart Paulson, Lucy, one of the biggest things I took away that I just want to like start us off as we kind of talk is like the decoding. Like we just want the more practice kids get, the better off they are, was very clear to me. Let them learn their letters, letter sounds. And actually you didn't say tons of time. Like it was 10 hours was the moment that I saw.
Phonological awareness, yeah, 10 hours cumulative.
Like that's nothing, right? That's like 180 days in a year. 10 hours could
Yeah.
be the first like 3 weeks to 4 weeks of school. That's right.
Well, you don't want to do that. That mass practice isn't something that we know is very valuable. But I think a take home point for me is it's a little bit of warm up every day. It's a little bit. It is not a 20-minute lesson. And in preschool, kinder, first grade, it only needs to be about 5 minutes,
I love that.
right?
Um,
And in your phonics lesson, you can have a little warm up to this phonologic system, and now you're going to apply letters to what you've just been listening to and practicing and saying.
I think the beautiful part then that I'm taking away, and I can't look at the chat to see, but a little bit of what you're saying is the more intentional we can be to do like 5 minutes of practice of learning it, some time to decode it, some time to keep practicing. Like this is all about learn it, learn it, practice it, like that science of learning of continuing
Absolutely.
to kind of go back and redo. Is that a big takeaway to think about?
That's a really big takeaway. All of those ingredients that go into a really good recipe, we have to have good ingredients and we build those. And that explicit instruction is critical. And then the practice that goes along with that instruction is vital.
Um, so I don't know if you heard this, but we changed the name of our take home decodable packs to our take everywhere decodable packs.
Oh,
Um,
good. It's not just home.
superintendents, yeah, it's not just home. So like that's actually, I heard you in my head. The superintendents were giving us feedback that they wanted it to be that kids took it all around campus and everywhere they went. So I thought about what you're saying of we want kids to practice and keep moving with the right practice for them, right? The right decoding skills that they need. Go
Yes,
ahead.
and a book. And Sarah, thank you for that. A decodable book is only decodable if you have been taught the pattern of that decodable book.
So basically our thoughts around data is very important then, right? Of making sure that it's the right book for a child based around the data for them. Is that what you'd say to that?
Absolutely. What is it that children know? And that's what they need to practice. And if they don't know, we need to teach them and then provide opportunities for practice.
It makes me think about our Take Everywhere decodable packs because that's based around exactly the work that child needs to do, based around the knowledge they have, and then provides them with the writing practice. How much time would you think they need to write every day? You didn't like, what's your take on that? I feel like I love you give
Yeah,
us this beautiful recipe for how people should design and think about their classroom instruction.
that is a really good question, Sarah. And that question has not been posed. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't know.
You're so
I
cute.
don't know. I don't know, but I don't think it has to be a long time. I think if you are reading a word, you need to write it. How long does that take?
That's not that it depends on how long it takes you, right? And the more you write, I'm guessing
Yeah,
the better you become and the faster you
yeah.
become and the more automatic it becomes, right?
I think there's so much to what a book that I'm thinking about, John Hattie and Kateri Almarode and let's see, Kateri Thunder, John Almarode and John Hattie. John Hattie and his visible learning. And he collaborated with two other researchers who are well into early childhood. They get it. And on visible learning in early childhood. And one of the things that they talk about is the opportunity to provide many, M-A-N-Y, mini, M-I-N-I lessons. Those are those teachable moments. So you read a word, oh, cool, let's write it. That was a mini lesson in reading, decoding, the phonological awareness component of what the sounds are, and then writing it. It's that entire literacy package.
Well, so you pushed you and Ray Reitzel pushed us to create that for the take everywheres with the writing page, right? Exactly what you're saying is it's not that hard. It's not that much, right? Yeah.
Let's just have that as part of our literacy lessons, the writing piece of it.
Do you
Not
know
separate.
there's nothing, yeah, it's nothing crazy. The other thing that I heard you say that we took to heart and I just want to give you a shout out on it is we actually changed all of our pre-K books to add a vision, like a little picture of the mouth. because we wanted kids to see it more so they could see it more.
Right. And you know what that does? It just brings to a conscious level of, oh, my mouth is doing this.
Right,
Because
right.
when we learn to talk, naturally, unless you need someone like me as a speech therapist where it didn't go so well for you in that learning process, when you learn how to talk, you don't really have to consciously be aware of what your mouth is doing. But now, when we want to learn letters and we want to connect a sound to it, when we consciously are aware of what our mouth is doing, it makes another connection point to what that learning is.
I feel like a big part of this is like allowing kids to know the work we're doing and seeing it and then having constant practice to try it, know what you're like, you're being so clear and explicit in everything you're doing, even in
Mhm.
the practice for them.
Yeah, watch this. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I know we know one of the best teaching strategies that we can do before we start a lesson is to give children an understanding of what this lesson is about and what they're going to be learning. And when we say, we're going to think of figure out what your mouth, feel what your mouth is doing, you're letting them know that that is an important connection and something that they can draw upon when they're trying to figure out what this word is that they're trying to spell and what their mouth is doing when they want to isolate a sound so that then they can attach a letter to it. It's just another one of those, I think, again, connection point that's going to give them information and how they can be successful.
We heard you say that last time too, last time we spoke, and we changed the videos to like have a zoom in on the mouth. I think the more that you're saying is like it's all connected actually. Think about the mouth when you're making the digraphs, think about the mouth when you're making your letter sounds, like provide yourself practice to everything and even have it all happening in a fun way in just your attendance. Like the more that it's literally every part of it, the more successful kids are, right?
That's right. That's right. And the more we can help them be successful, the more success they are going to have.
Mhm.
Right?
Tracy, are there any questions that you think we should throw out for Dr. Hart Paulson?
Yes. I think one of them is what high frequency words do you recommend introducing across grades? Is there a scope and sequence for that you recommend?
I think there are a number of them that are out there. So you can take one. The important thing, I think, is to emphasize to children for whatever word it is that they are learning to read and learning to recognize is that there is a focus on identify the sound patterns in the letters in the word. Don't just have a focus on what the shape of the word looks like or trying to recognize it as a whole. Always have a focus on look at the letters, see what sounds you know that those letters are representing, and then figure out how to read it and then map it and then put it as a heart word or a memory word. So the sight word, as I mentioned, that term sight kind of gives us the wrong avenue of getting to it because you don't want children to memorize words based on the way that they look. That will teach them to be slow readers. That's what people who have difficulty learning how to read, people who have dyslexia, that's what they fall back on, is trying to memorize words based on the words, the way that they look. And you can only do that for so long before you hit a wall and there are too many words to memorize. So the focus, whatever that sequence is, the focus always needs to be on the sound symbol relationship in the spelling patterns of those words.
Wonderful. We have one more question that we'll answer here, and a couple of people asked it, just asking about what a good phonological processing screener or PA assessment would be.
Mhm. Okay, so phonological processing, I think, and I will honestly admit, I've been out of that assessment realm for a little bit of time. But when I was in clinical practice for older students, where I was really wondering about what their phonological processing system was from a diagnostic perspective, it's the CTOP. So you can look that up. Joe Torgerson was one of the authors of the CTOP. For younger kids, a lot of the screening, the purchased screening measures that you are using, beginning with Dibbles, and then it was Dibbles Next, and now there's Dibbles 8, and there's Acadians, and there's AimsWeb, and there are a lot of them that are doing that. Any kind of indicator where there is a 1 minute timed, tell me how many letters you know. Tell me how many letters you can say in a minute, right? Just read all these letters that you know, or look at all these pictures and identify the beginning sound in as many pictures as you can in a minute. Those are phonological naming tasks. And, you know, in another conversation, a phonological processing, a bigger picture of phonological processing, that phonological naming task is a huge indicator in young children, preschool, kinder, first grade, when kids are not able to efficiently come up with the words that you know they know. Yeah, that could be a topic for another day.
We should add it in.
The past is an assessment that is helpful. If it's the past from Kilpatrick, and thanks, Ashley, for mentioning that. If it's the past from Kilpatrick, that one I love for older students, but it starts with those higher level manipulation tasks of deletion. And so it doesn't give you information on what children can do in earlier developing phonological awareness tasks like blending and segmenting, basic blending and segmenting of phonemes, and even earlier blending and segmenting of syllables in the preschool years. So there's another past by another author, Zonk. I think her name is spelled Zgonk. She has a purchased one. And what that gives to us is a sequence of tasks that we can use. I would refer to we have better information today about age expectations for those tasks, but that gives you some information about those are screening measures. And sometimes moving into a diagnostic screener, which can be really valuable too when kids aren't getting it. Yeah.
Dr. Hart Paulson, always like joy, bliss, and you have groupies here. So I have seen some names. I looked at the list of who's here. Some people have come to every single session we've done with you. I can't wait to do another. And it's really nice to know that like this product we're trying to create, the more we can take in all the knowledge that you give us and that other researchers give us, we just feel really empowered because it's all about kids. And we feel lucky to work with researchers like you who every ounce of like every moment of your time is just all about kids. I know it is.
Well, thanks for the opportunity. And again, thank you to all of you for what it is that you do. Your dedication and commitment is so heartwarming. I am humbled by what you get to do and the work that you do and the difference that you get to make for kids, because that's the most important thing.
Always inspirational. All right, we love it. Take Everywhere PAX. It's all based on the best research, knowledge, and tell them, Lucy, go off and do all their fabulous. Go ahead, you get the last word.
You do it. Go do all your fabulous. Make a difference, because that's what makes you happy. It brings you a lot of joy for all the hard work that you do. It's the oxygen of what you do, the joy for your hard work. So yay.
Thanks, Dr. Hart Paulson. Goodbye, everyone.